Good evening, everybody. Jump out Martin Melly here. Hope you're going well. Just coming to you from North London, just out on a bit of a walk tonight. And so, recently, I have thought about going back to Australia soon. Well, I'm due back in November. But I'm kind of thinking I may or may not head back soon. Because of my current situation. But the thing is, the red carpet has always been rolled out for me in the United Kingdom. It doesn't matter that I was actually born in Australia. What matters was I was born with British citizenship and the entitlement to live in the United Kingdom without any restrictions. I voted in elections. I've, pussycat? Yes. What have I done? I've paid taxes. I've received unemployment benefits when I'm on the dole. I've worked in this country. I've been able to travel from British airports to get to foreign destinations that many of them you wouldn't be able to reach if you live in Australia. So, I'm also talking about times I would have actually thought about going back to Australia in the last 9 years. Okay? Now, I moved to London in June 2017, just a wing of prayer. I was on the verge of being homeless. I was sick and tired of people not giving me a job in Birmingham. I previously been punched in a month prior. I experienced a lot of insultness and rudeness and crap workers in the industry in Birmingham. Well, not only Birmingham, just Staffordshire where I had to work. And so it was either to move to London or move back to Australia, because if I had moved back to Australia, it would have just been shit. I probably would still be working at a Rogers Function Centre. I don't think my life would have been that good if I went back to Australia. But there were times I thought, oh mate, is it time that I go back to Australia? And I didn't. Though I can clearly remember a week into being in London after a terrorist attack, my mother had gave me some money. And she basically said to me, a terrorist attack that happened in London, it could affect you. Get the fuck out of Australia. Here's $1,500. Now, I was about to book a flight on a Philippine Airlines to get to Manila and get back to Australia. But unfortunately, I couldn't remember this code on the back of my card. I just couldn't even read it. So I couldn't make the payment. So I eventually used the money to pay my rent in London, and eventually I was hired, weeks later, for a job that I stayed in for close to 5 years, give or take the month in Sweden. So I was... And then months down the track, when I got scammed in Golders Green when I was renting this room, what had happened was I had basically paid a deposit to move into a room, and the guy renting the place, who collects all the money, came to my room, collected my rent money, took it, it wasn't all there. I was maybe 30 quid short, and he lied to me saying there wasn't any rent money. And so I was really racist to him. He was Italian. I hurled a lot of racial abuse at him, told him to bugger off in this country, told him to stop scamming British people. Because at the time I was living in a house full of Italian migrants and they wouldn't speak English, and they'd ask, oh, why are you here? So I remember just writing to my mum thinking, I might as well just go back to Australia, but I didn't go back. Because 2 months later, I ended up going to Central Asia, and all these idiot Italians I was living with, smoking, drinking, they don't get the money to go to Kazakhstan because they're fuckwits. So that was and then also, I remember Stevie Nicks was actually going to play in Australia, and I asked my dad if I should go back to Australia for this concert, and I'd been away for a year. But I didn't go back because my father said it's not worth it to stay in London. I eventually saw Stevie Nicks in Manchester years later. Now, when I was in Sweden 8 years ago, after I abandoned London because of these, because they hired an Indian dumbass, no offense to Indian people, I thought to myself, look, it's tempting. I've only got $1,000 left. I could fly back to Australia via India. But I decided I'd go back to the United Kingdom after an overland trip from Yas all the way to get to back to London with a stop off in Moldova. Now, I remember this one day I had a really shit time at work because I was being lazy. I hadn't cut enough chips, so I was sick and tired of the chef. And I was like, oh, looking for a flight back to Australia, go back through Thailand. It'll cost me 300 quid to go back to Australia. And I'm like, wait, you want to like quit your job because you're not getting along with this Italian guy whom I worked for years? And then I basically thought, forget it. You don't want to go back to Australia. You're not done with it. Back in May 2019, I had a fight with this guy I was working with, and it was a massive cunt. And I worked with him for 5 years, and even though we haven't spoken to each other for years, so I'm thankful for going to work with him. But at the time, I was like, all right, I'm living with this lady, paying month to month, and she doesn't really want me around anymore. Just because of like taxes and all those things. So I remember trying to pester people in Sweden to fucking interview me and give me a job because they never gave me a chance. And I mean, I remember it was like, I remember a few weeks before I was supposed to go to Beirut, I got so fed up in my job that the dishwasher broke down and I was about to like quit. But with the help of a gay guy who encouraged me to stay on, and like I stayed on. I eventually went to Lebanon weeks later. But I came so close to fucking off to Venezuela for a trip. Now, and then the pandemic hit, basically. I was homeless. I ended up living with a Jamaican lady for a month. And there was no way I was going to go back to Australia when all the laws and restrictions were put in place. Because the horrible thing was, I had my British passport locked up at the Ghana High Commission. And then I had my Australian passport. Sure, I could leave the United Kingdom. But, being a British citizen, not having that British passport, would be trouble trying to come back into the country. So there was no point going back to Australia. Even if my mother was going to pay for my quarantine fees, I basically just said F no. I said some nasty things about my intolerance with migrants in Australia. I was fed up. That's why, I left Australia, because some days I get intolerant of, dumbasses, like a Nigerian woman cancelling all my shifts in Melbourne, or a Chinese lady telling me how to write up my resume in Melbourne. I just thought, why the fuck do I stick around with these things? So, I eventually, basically, there was no way I was going to go back to Australia during the pandemic. Now, 2022 comes along, and something bad has happened to my mom, and she's been a bit ill, and I've been persuaded by people working near me to go back to Australia. And I had the money, I could have done it, but I was already focused on spending a whole month in Southern Africa because I saved up a lot of money. I was quitting my job after 5 years. I was going to go take on a few more nations. But sadly, I only stuck around in Southern Africa for a month. I kind of wish I went from Cape Town to Cairo. So there are times you think, as an Australian who lives abroad, who hasn't been home in 10 years, people always pester you to go back to Australia, and you give them two fingers. You basically say, I don't care what you think about me, I'm entitled to live in the United Kingdom, and I've got really nothing against Australia, even though I haven't paid my taxes, because I don't have to pay taxes because I don't live in Australia, okay? But yeah, it's just really a heap of shit. And with all my medical conditions, I've never had to pay a cent in medicines in the United Kingdom. And I thank you, NHS, and I'm grateful for that, because I had to pay for that type of shit in Australia. So it's I don't think I would really be happy, being on a dollar in Australia. Okay, I only have to pay a few bucks for medicines, fine. But it's I don't want to go back to Australia and do shitty jobs and zero hour contracts and having to deal with yet again a load of foreigners coming in and fucking things up in the country. Because it's some people, you have to stand up for things. It's like what happened in Bondi, all right? I was deeply affected with what happened in Bondi, despite the fact that I'm only 1/8 Jewish. But I'm really just fucking stupid terrorists are always going to be doing shit like this in Western countries, and it makes us all intolerant. It makes us all think, oh, well, an Indian Muslim man and his fucking son killed 15 people in Bondi. Do I have negative opinions on Indian people? Not really, but you just don't really have an intolerance to people of a certain group, you know? Because, I mean, imagine if I had to have protection to go to church. Imagine if you had to live in a country where the police would protect you at church. So, I don't want to go back to Australia. I don't care that months down the track I may still be unemployed. I don't care that I'm still on the dole. I don't care that I may have to leave London soon and move somewhere else. Belfast and all. I just don't care. I have no regrets. I'm grateful for my 9 years in London, because if you are an Australian who wants to live in the United Kingdom, you've only got like 3 possible routes. You either inherit British or European nationality through your parents or your grandparents, or great-grandparents, depending how it is. 2 is you get the, if you had British Irish ancestry, you would get the whole visa, but you have to work for a solid 5 years. Live in the United Kingdom for a solid 5 years before you get any access to public funds, indefinitely to remain. And then after you're indefinitely to remain, you become a British citizen, naturalized. But if I was not a British citizen, I would not bother living in this country, because the Australians who don't have, British nationality, British citizenship, British ancestry, they only get 2 years. They only get 2 years as a young person between 18 to 30 years old to work. And once you're done 2 years, you don't get another 2 years. It's, even though when you think about it, the amount of Australians who have moved to the United Kingdom, like Kylie Minogue, Becky Hill, Nick Cave, they've had decent jobs because they're entertainers. And then you compare that to someone like, Leo Sayer, entertainer who basically moved to Australia. You think, well, they've worked hard for these work permits. It's okay if you're rich, but if you're basically just some guy who's basically has dead-end jobs in hospitality, doesn't care much about owning a property, doesn't have a girlfriend and pays for sex, doesn't care about going back to Australia, or basically just wants to see more of the world, okay? Because you're going to die someday, and when you pass on, you want to be remembered for what you did in life. Anyway, I'm Arthur Millett, over and out.